To watch every news story from Westbound Hearts First, subscribe now. The wind came howling down from the high country, wild and ruthless, shrieking through the canyon and tearing across the settlement of Hollow Ridge like something feral. It slammed against rooftops, rattled every loose shutter, and slipped beneath doors with icy fingers. Inside the old schoolhouse, Margaret Delaney stood motionless, breath foggy in the chill, eyes fixed on the snow-covered trail beyond the windows. The children had long gone, boots crunching through drifts in pairs and trios, scarves knotted tight and laughter vanishing behind them. But she hadn't followed. She remained to wipe the chalkboard, though really, it was just a reason to delay the long walk home to her empty cabin. 6 months had passed since her husband's death, 3 since her last pay, and one more blizzard might mean no one remembered her at all. Margaret wrapped her shawl tighter and stepped outside. Snow nearly swallowed her boots. The cold cut into her cheeks, stole her breath, and stung her chapped lips. Each step toward the edge of town felt heavier than the last. The lantern in her hand sputtered, barely pushing back the dark. More stubborn than your husband ever was, old Mrs. Turner had said when Margaret turned down the church's charity last week. But pride had died the day John did. All that remained was her promise to keep Hollow Ridge's schoolhouse open, even if the mountains turned to ice and the world forgot she existed. By the time she reached her cabin, her hands were numb and clumsy. The key slipped twice before she managed to unlock the door. Inside, the cold was unrelenting. The fireplace lay dead. Her last bundle of firewood had burned the night before. She lit a single oil lamp, dropped her satchel, and stared at John's coat still hanging untouched by the door, quiet, ghostly, and unmoving, a relic of a man who had vanished into a snowstorm searching for help and never returned. Margaret sank into the rocker, scarf loose around her shoulders, and watched the fireless hearth. Her stomach wasn't empty from hunger. It was a silence that twisted inside her. Then came the knock, a firm, deliberate knock that didn't belong in a storm like this. She stood slowly, one hand brushing the pistol on the mantel. "Miss Delaney?" The voice was low, male, calm. "Who's there?" she called. "Ward Brennan, from the North Ridge." She froze. Everyone in Hollow Ridge knew that name. War hero, ranch owner, lived alone above the timberline, spoke little, trusted less. Trouble, some said. "What do you want?" "Wood," he replied. "And, if there's space, supper." Her hand dropped from the pistol. "I don't have much," she said. He didn't answer. She cracked the door open. There he stood, snow crusted on his hat, ice clinging to his coat. One arm held a sack of split wood, the other tucked against his side. "I heard things weren't easy for you," he said. "I'm not here to pity you. Just figure we might help each other." She didn't respond, just stepped aside. He entered quietly, stacked the wood, and struck a match without waiting. Soon, a low flame danced a life on the hearth. "You've been watching the school," she said. "I have." "Why?" "To see how long you'd last." She bristled. "I'm not in need of saving." "I didn't say you were." He met her gaze then, firelight catching the edges of his face. "But I felt what it's like to keep a life going with nothing but cold in your bones." The fire began to glow brighter, and so did the room. "Why now?" she asked. "Why tonight?" "There's another storm coming, stronger, and if you'll let me, I'd rather you not die in the dark just to prove a point." Her throat tightened. "You don't know me." "Not yet." They shared a silent meal, what little she had left. He said nothing of its sparseness. Instead, he spoke of cattle runs, wolves in a high ridge, and losing a brother to war and a wife to sickness. She offered nothing, yet somehow he still understood. When he rose to leave, he left half the wood by the hearth, and a small parcel, flour, beans, and coffee. "I'll return," he said. "Check on the children, and see if your pride's thawed any." Margaret didn't answer, but her hands didn't shake any more when she shut the door. Outside, the wind wailed like something wounded. Inside, the fire burned steady. And for the first time in weeks, Margaret Delaney felt something close to hope. The storm didn't ease, it worsened. Snow cut sideways through the streets, piling in against fences, swallowing paths. Townfolk stayed shuttered inside. But Margaret walked each day to the schoolhouse. The attendance thinned. By week's end, only 3 children remained, Mary, Paul, and little Nora, who hadn't spoken since her mother's passing. She wrapped Nora's hands in her own, read them stories by candlelight, and taught what she could. The fire flickered out before noon. Still, she read aloud. "I've got the key to my castle in the air," she whispered. "But whether I can open the door—" Her voice cracked. Then the door opened. "Class is over," Ward Brent announced, snow swirling behind him. "You don't make that call," Margaret said, standing tall. "I brought the wagon," he replied evenly. "Hot bricks, blankets, room for 3. I didn't agree to this." I spoke to their parents. They did. The children glanced between them. Margaret blocked the door. "You should have spoken to me. I tried. 3 days ago. You didn't listen." They stared at each other, heat rising in the cold room. Finally, Margaret stepped aside. Once the children were safe, Ward returned, again uninvited. "You'll freeze," he said simply. "I'll manage." "No," he said quiet now. "You won't." He crossed to her desk and placed a folded paper there. A contract, room and board. "You teach the ranch hands kids. Until spring." She unfolded it. His writing was bold. "The offer fair. More than fair." "Why me?" she whispered. "Because you didn't walk away," he said, "when anyone else would have." She read it again. "I'm not offering charity," he added. "This is a partnership, one that matters. I don't want to owe you." "You won't." "I keep my independence." "Yes." "And if I leave in spring?" "You walk." She hesitated. "I'll think about it. I'll be back in the morning." 2 days later, she was teaching in a converted room inside the Brennan Ranch. Once a library, now warm with oil lamps and young voices. 10 children arrived, all curious, all wild. Some couldn't write their names, but could track a lost calf in a blizzard. They asked if she was a real teacher. She answered every question with a smile. By midday, the room came alive with numbers and words and stories. The children drew pictures. One girl, Sadie, sketched Margaret with a fire glowing behind her. Ward brought stew and bread, left without a word. But that night, he returned again, this time with a wool blanket hand-stitched in red roses. "Catherine made it," he said, before she passed. "You keep her work here?" She believed warmth should be shared, even with strangers. Later, Margaret found the drawing again. Sadie had written at the bottom, "She makes the cold go away." That night, Margaret heard coughing near the barn. She found Ward bent over, blood on his sleeve. "You're sick." "It's nothing." But she helped him inside, forced him to sit, wiped his brow, and fed the fire like her life depended on it. "My husband died like this," she whispered. 3 days from the first cough to the last. "I'm not him," Ward said, breath ragged. "I know." And she did. He survived. She stayed. When he was strong enough to speak again, he said, "Catherine built that classroom in her dreams. I couldn't open it. You did now." "No," he replied. "You did." The town talked. "Have you heard?" they whispered. "She's living under his roof. She doesn't wear mourning black anymore." Margaret heard it all. It stung, not because it wasn't true, but because some of it was. When she returned to the ranch, Ward was feeding the horses. "They're saying things," she said. "Let them," he replied, "or give them something real to talk about." He handed her a paper, not a ring, but a contract. Marriage, but on her terms, her school, her space, her choices. "I'm offering a shield," he said, "from the world." They married quietly. No guests, no celebration, just words spoken beside a fire. He kissed her cheek, nothing more, but her heart swelled anyway. The child came in late April. They named him James Delaney Brennan. James for strength, Brennan for home. When Margaret sat on the porch days later, baby in arms, Ward beside her, the bell rang for a new school term. The valley was still dusted with snow, but spring had come. She kissed her son's forehead and whispered, "You came from winter, but you were born for spring." Ward turned to her, his voice low and sure. "I told you I'd wait." She smiled. "And I told you it was worth it." This was Winter's promise. If it touched your heart, leave a like, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories from the old frontier, where love, loss, and second chances still ride the wind.